Hi, everyone, and welcome to our 5th Game for Thought live stream series of the academic year. Welcome again to our Twitch. We're super excited to have you here, whether you are a Howest student, a DIE student, whether you're just scrolling through Twitch. We so appreciate you joining us here this evening. If this is your first time joining a Game for Thought stream, absolutely no worries. I'm going to cover what basically goes on during these monthly streams. So, Howest Hogeschool's campus for digital arts and entertainment. That is where we are right now. We are primarily a school focusing on the game industry and the film industry. In an industry that is so technical, sometimes it can be easy to lose sight of the more socially relevant, ethically relevant topics. And so we sat together and we thought it would be a great opportunity to have a monthly stream where each month we would go ahead and choose a ethically relevant topic and sit down with experts, lecturers in the field, and students and discuss these topics in a really open, honest, and nuanced fashion. So the topic of this stream for the month of April is social media and privacy. Usually what happens during the stream, we begin with a presentation. This stream's presentation will be done by Dr. Ralph Dewolfe. Dr. Ralph Dewolfe is a postdoctoral researcher at the Department of Communication Studies, and he's also connected to the Research Group for Media, Innovation, and Communication Technologies at the University of Ghent. And so after that presentation, which will be awesome, we'll head into the panel discussion. So we'll have around an hour-long moderated panel discussion, which is super lively. You're more than welcome to contribute in the chat at any time. So on the panel tonight, of course, we have Dr. Ralph Dewolfe, who will be giving our presentation. We'll also have, as a returning moderator, our very own Robin Rodet. Robin is our visual effects major coordinator here at Digital Arts and Entertainment. Our other panelists for tonight include Dr. Rob Heyman. Dr. Heyman is the lead coordinator of the Knowledge Center Data and Society, and he's also a researcher at the Group for Studies in Media, Innovation, and Technology at the Vrije Universiteit Brussels. We also have Ina van Zeeland. She is a PhD researcher at that same group for studies in media, innovation, and technology at the Vrije Universiteit Brussels. And we have two students joining us here tonight from Digital Arts and Entertainment. Welcome. We have Alec Beelan. He is a second-year independent game graphics production student. And we also have Joran Fori here tonight with us, and he's a second-year game graphics production student. So enjoy. We really hope you have fun during the stream and you find the topics interesting during the presentation, during the panel, really anytime throughout the stream tonight. You're more than welcome to ask any questions that you might have in the Twitch chat. Just make sure you go ahead and you write a Q beforehand, so we're just sure that we know it's a question for the panel, and then we will send it along to our panel moderator, Robin. So once again, thank you so much for joining us for our 5th ever Game for Thought live stream about social media and privacy. We're super happy to have you here. And without further ado, I will pass it over to our guest speaker for the evening, Dr. Ralph Dewolfe. All right, Ralph, we are ready for your presentation, so you have the floor.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Ralph Dewolfe. I hope that everybody's doing fine considering the global pandemic that we're still in. Thank you, Ali, also for inviting me. I always like to talk about social media and privacy. It's also, I guess, it's been a couple of months, I guess, since I gave a presentation to a technical audience. So I'm a communication scientist. I also have a sociology degree, so I have a background in sociology, a PhD in media and communication studies. So it's always fun to also give a presentation to people with another background, I guess. And after the presentation, I hope we can broaden this up and have a nice discussion with all of you. Okay, Maybe some words about myself. Who am I? I'm a postdoctoral researcher and assistant at the Department of Communication Sciences. I now also do research about algorithms, automation, artificial intelligence. But in the beginning of my career, I solely focused on privacy. In the beginning, I focused on privacy practices of teens in the context of Facebook and other social media. But nowadays, I also study children practices, their view on privacy and data protection. And in the future, I also want to focus on families. So I'm also a teacher. I teach media ethics at the University of Ghent, and I also teach new media studies. And if you want to know more about me, there's a link below with my bibliography. So you can always check that out. But if you have questions afterwards, don't hesitate to contact me. So basically, there are three main things that I want to do in this presentation. First, I want to show you how important it is to have a clear view on what privacy actually is. Second, I want to give you a glimpse of research, a glimpse of research about the practices of users to show you that, well, they're not just unconcerned or irrational. We often think that, especially about young people. And finally, I want to show you how service providers and social media are also actors that shape the privacy management. And I want to focus on one thing that I think, or at least hope, will interest you. It's a case of Zynga and the Farmville case. Okay, when we think about privacy, at the end of my PhD, I got to see a very interesting research report that was back in 2014. And they asked more than 100 experts about the future of privacy. So within 10 years, so 2024, you could say. And these were some remarkable quotes that they said. They argued how living the public life will be the new default, transparency will replace privacy as the social norm and ideal, and privacy is a passing artifact of the industrial age. So when you think about it, many experts and also many people, lay people, I guess, can be very skeptic and negative when it comes to privacy. Certainly, when you take into account the Cambridge Analytica scandal or the most recent Facebook leakage. So these are all things that, well, basically underline that disempowerment of users and these practices of mass surveillance. So many believe that privacy is dead, or at least is dying. And we cannot do much about how these big corporations manage and control our data. So I think this is a very harsh conclusion. And my answer would be, it depends. It depends on how you define privacy and how you give meaning to it. And this is something that I want to do. I want to show you how we have different interpretations on what privacy actually is. And the first one, well, it takes me back in history a bit. It's originated in the 1890s, and it's a text from Samuel Warren and Louis Brandeis. And they were one of the first ones to make that connection between privacy and technological advancement. So specifically, they argued how the paparazzi and instantaneous photography have invaded the sacred precincts of private and domestic life, and numerous mechanical devices threaten to make good the prediction that what is whispered in the closet shall be proclaimed from the housetops. So they argued how privacy should be seen as a right, a fundamental right, and how each man and woman can use that right as a weapon to defend their privacy. Maybe a cool anecdote. Both authors, so Samuel Warren and Louis Brandeis, they were Supreme Judges in the United States, and they were rather famous. So one of the reasons to write this fundamental text was because during a family gathering, Samuel Warren, of Samuel Warren, the paparazzi, took some pictures and posted them in the Saturday Evening Gazette, a local newspaper. So if we then take a look at the way that they see privacy, they really see it as a fundamental right, the right to be let alone, something that is on the same level as the right to be treated equally or the right to freedom, and so on. But if we look at privacy nowadays, we can see that people treat it more as an individual property that can be traded or exchanged for other properties. And this brings me to the second interpretation, the interpretation of Alan Weston. So basically what he says is that privacy is the claim of individuals, groups, or institutions to determine for themselves when, how, and to what extent information about them is communicated to others. So you see that privacy here is totally differently conceptualized. They see it as something that belongs to an individual and needs to be controlled by an individual. So it's an information control. And when you think about it, it's a very liberal or maybe even an American point of view on privacy, where you see it as a means that leads to something else, like achieving personal autonomy, self-reflection, and so on. I guess for the purpose of also this presentation, it's important to differentiate between both and see how privacy can be a fundamental right that needs to be ensured for us, protection, you could say. And on the other hand, an individual responsibility, something that we as individuals need to control. So one of the things that we as communication scientists love to do is look at how, surprise, things are communicated and represented. And that's exactly what I've done a couple of years ago with my co-author, Stan Joie, is we analyzed 210 articles between the period of 2007 and 2018 with the keywords Facebook privacy and teens. In total, we found 210 articles that substantially discussed these topics. And then we looked at how privacy was really discussed. And the main conclusion was that privacy is often seen, or the dominant discourse at least, is that of privacy as control. And what was also interesting is that it was complemented with two other discourses. The first one is about teenagers being unconcerned and reckless. And the second one was about the promise of privacy literacy. So privacy is seen as a matter of individual control, and young people are seen as unconcerned. And when you looked at both discourses, is that they perpetuated one another. So when arguing that young people do not care about their privacy because they lack control over their personal information, you're also assuming that privacy equals control and vice versa. Also, the last couple of years, especially from 2016 onwards, is that media literacy and privacy literacy, to be specific, were proposed as a potential solution. Again, this underlines that notion of controllability. So rather than questioning, for example, the technology or the underlying political economy in which these systems, social media, is embedded. So I guess it's important to get things straight and first conceptualize privacy in an appropriate way. Of course, as communication scientists, we also love to check out what people actually do. And I guess it's also important to look at their privacy management and their attitudes. And one thing that is, well, we notice from, for example, the discourse analysis, but also from many different studies, is that teenagers are often depicted as being unconcerned, whereas grown-ups or adults are seen as people who care about their privacy. And specifically, teens are then seen as lazy and those who need to be educated, and children are seen as those who are vulnerable and need to be protected. And then a notion that you're probably more or less familiar with is that notion of the privacy paradox, or the idea that people claim to care about privacy, but do not really enact on it. So there's a discrepancy between their attitudes and their behaviors. I have to say that in the literature, this is a very contested concept. Some people find proof, but I have to say in all of my studies, I don't find proof for the privacy paradox. On the contrary, what I found is that privacy concern is the most important predictor of privacy management behavior. So people who are very concerned are more likely to, for example, use privacy controls or other settings that are offered by the service provider. In addition, what I find is that when people have the feeling that they as an individual cannot really control their information, is that they're more likely to negotiate information with other people and negotiate what information can and cannot be shared. Also, when they're sharing very intimate information, sometimes young people do that, like nudes or others, sexually tinted pictures, for example, they also very much use most of the time, very strict boundaries or strict measures before sharing them. So for me, this is all an illustration that teens are not really irrational in their behavior. Um, this is a quote, and I also want to show you this because we shouldn't also just see privacy as using the control options that are offered by service providers. People often move beyond the tech that they are offered to manage their own personal boundaries or that of others. And I think this conversation of Dana Boyd's, it's kind of a famous ethnographer, had with of her teens that she followed for a couple of months is quite illustrative. So I'll read it out loud. So in a world in which posting updates is common, purposeful, and performative, sharing often allows teens to control a social situation more than simply opting out. It also guarantees that others can't define the social situation. Sitting in an after school program in LA, I casually asked a teen participant why she shared so many embarrassing photos of herself on her profile. She laughed and told me that it was a lot safer if she shared the photos and put them into context by what she wrote than if she did not, because she knew that her friends also had embarrassing photos. They'd be happy to embarrass her if she let them. But by taking preemptive action and mocking herself by writing dismissive messages on photos that could be interpreted problematically, she undermined her friend's ability to define the situation differently. After explaining her logic, she continued on to explain how her apparent exhibitionism left plenty of room for people to not focus in on the things that were deeply intimate in her life. So, this is for me a clear illustration on how privacy can be conceptualized differently. So you could probably say that by sharing intimate information online or even for a very broad audience, that's automatically the same as giving up your privacy. But for many teens, this is not the case. They can also have the feeling of controlling the social situation, and that can, in a sense, also be privacy preserving. So when I scanned through the questions that I got on the Google Docs, it kind of noticed me is that we are often focused on panoptic surveillance, you could say, or how these big corporations or service providers use our information, and that we don't really know what to do about it. But I also want to draw your attention to other things as well. So when we look at the privacy behavior of users, we also find some worrying trends that go beyond that surveillance or that big brother effect, you could say. So I guess the overly obsessed girlfriend meme also illustrates this. So how we should also worry about social surveillance or basically monitoring or watching each other all of the time. So this is not really surveillance that takes place between an individual and an invisible corporation, but it's more or less reciprocal. Each participant is broadcasting information that is looked at by others and looking at information broadcasted by others. So basically, we can look at another, survey one another constantly because of all of the information that we share. And I guess a specific example of this social surveillance, or what some people also call intimate surveillance, can be very problematic. Intimate surveillance is defined as the purposeful and routinely well-intentioned surveillance of young people by parents, guardians, friends, and so on, so forth. So basically, those who are being surveyed have little or no agency to resist. And this is something that happens more and more. So where, for example, parents scan social media or use tracking devices to monitor and control their kids. Of course, they have the best intention, but yet again, the idea might also be normalized that digital surveillance of children equates with care and good parenting. And of course, this is not the same thing. Then the final thing that I also wanted to show you about privacy practices of people before we head into the role of social media and social games is the biggest lie on the internet. So we all know this. We all had a gut feeling that this was true. But Obar and Nuldorf Hirsch in 2020 also did the research and looked at the reading behavior of people in an experiment and whether or not they read the privacy policy and the terms of service. So they measured that if you wanted to meaningfully read the privacy policy, it should have taken 29 to 32 minutes to read. And they found out that the average reading time was 73 seconds. So it's very hard for people to read it, apparently. And just also a side note, only 1/4 of their participants also didn't skip the privacy policy. So 75% approximately just skipped the privacy policy, and the other people in their experiment only spent 73 seconds time to reading it. Okay, I guess for the purpose of this short presentation, that maybe this final chapter will be the most interesting for you. So when we look at social games, we know that a lot of attention has been focused previously on big companies like Facebook, Google, and so on. But I guess it's also equally important to recognize the widespread adoption of social games. There used to be Mafia Wars, Farmville, Clash of Clans. Nowadays, it's also Hero Wars, War and Order. I think these are all very prominent games or social games nowadays. And the implicit contract that we have with them is that if we want to use these services, is that we have to trade information about their friends or likes, desires, consumption habits, and in return we get free access. And in 2015, I think their article is still appropriate nowadays. Wilson and Lever wrote an article about Zynga, entrepreneurial heroes or sinister farm villains. So they really checked out if we are actually making a fair trade or not. For those who don't know, this was the user interface that you saw. So you could manage your social privacy to a sense. So you could make it available for only your friends, friends of friends, or the entire world to see if you're playing this game. And you could also control your information towards the third party, but to a lesser extent, of course. So what they argued when analyzing the company Zynga is that they noticed that they very much try to highlight themselves as a gaming company, probably not the same as Rockstar Games or Blizzard or whatever, but still as a gaming company, while the back space or the backstage, you could say, of the company was that of a data analytics company. So very few Farmville players considered how their movement and their mouse clicks were also algorithmically studied and steer them into paying attention to the game or even buying virtual goods in their games, like loot boxes. And you still might think that Zynga is nothing in comparison to Facebook, but in December 2012, Facebook, which at that time took a large revenue income of Zynga, argued how 12% of their total profits was made by Zynga. So it's still a huge deal, those social games. So we shouldn't really underestimate it. So if you then take a look closer at the contracts, I guess it's difficult or even impossible to look at the game in order to determine if you would like it or not without agreeing with that data trade-off. It's like buying a car without doing a test drive. And I guess the second bullet is the most interesting for you guys as well, is that we cannot underestimate that facilitating role of the user interface. For example, if you would click the game on this interface, you would automatically also accept the terms of service. So it has a double meaning, which makes it very difficult for users to actually also, well, read the terms of service. So this is also called in the literature cultural opacity. So you could see it as the very opposite of transparency or even privacy by design. It's really where legal terms, the way they're positioned, and the platform context, they all work against a user seriously engaging with those terms of services or the privacy policy. So when you think about it, it's very difficult for end users to really consider how their data is being used and what they really can do about it. So because I think I'm still on time. Not really sure, but I still have some concluding remarks. So first and foremost, I think it's necessary also for social scientists, but also for scientists in general, to question that authoritative language on privacy. So we often hear people put an emphasis on control, management, and literacy. And by all means, these are very important things. And we need to be cognizant of what is happening online. But at the same time, we shouldn't underestimate how privacy is also a fundamental right. And our privacy should be protected for us as well. Otherwise, we put a lot of pressure on the shoulders of individuals. So I would argue that we need to mitigate extensive responsibilization in which individuals alone are responsible for their privacy. Second, let's stop blaming young people as being reckless and unconcerned. It's simply not true. They have another way of managing their privacy, and when we look at their attitudes and their behaviors, they do align with one another. I'm not saying that there are no problems, but probably these issues are also applicable to adults as well. So maybe we could question the irrational context rather than the irrational user. Third thing, take into account the privacy of the other. A lot of things are being said about managing your own personal privacy, but we should also realize that privacy is being negotiated with other people and also in the platforms that we use. So negotiating what can and cannot be shared with other people, for example, between children and parents, is also something very important to do. And finally, and this is something that I think both social scientists and engineers have to do, is create a platform where people can really negotiate their information flows with third parties in a meaningful way. And that's all I had to say for this presentation. I tried to keep it within those 20 minutes. If you want to know more, the references are in here, but you can ask me also in the panel or send me an email afterwards as well. Thank you.
All right, I think we are live on the stream for real this time. We had a small hiccup earlier, but now we are live correctly with everyone, with all of the panelists here. I'm Robin. I'm going to be moderating this talk because once again, the truly talented and intellectual moderators couldn't make it. But I'm going to make up for that by having a couple of intellectuals with me in the panel. With me, I have Inne, Ralph, Rob, Alec, and Joran, who will be talking about the topic of social media and privacy. So, everybody, social media. Is our society over-exaggerating when it comes to this topic? Is there really an issue going on or not? Someone that wants to pick up that one.
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Okay.
And I don't think people are exaggerating about it, but most people just don't grasp what data is. For example, like, oh yeah, there was a data leak. What leaked? Is it important for me? And if you don't know if it is important for you, you're gonna feel like, oh, it's never important, but like it can be really important.
All right. I thought, Rob, you wanted to pitch in on this. Yes.
Yeah, sure. I think we can see social media as a trend. And as a trend, it's one of the forerunners that used a lot of personal data to create a service and make money. And it's only going to increase in society that we have services that rely on data to create their services and generate money. And if you look at how it's going there, we should be worried because there's very little control about personal data. There's a lot of neglect with regards to the values or expectations users have. And these seem to change as platforms evolve. So the services that are challenging social media or that are innovative now and have no business model will have a business model that comes into being over a few years. And if you look at how it's happening now, you can almost predict that it will be it will disadvantage its users right now. So the fans who were with these platforms from the beginning might feel betrayed in the end. And I'm a bit worried about that.
Yeah, I'm hearing yes. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, well, I think so. One of the main issues is also that a lot of people haven't really experienced a very privacy turbulent event. So basically, when you got the notification that Facebook leaked 3 million different addresses and other types of information, a lot of people don't really think that it will directly affect them, but people who are for example, victim of identity theft or phishing and so on, they have experienced a very turbulent event. And we then look at most research is that people who have experienced some privacy turbulence is that they're very more likely to manage their privacy differently in the future. So I guess it's the majority of people haven't really experienced something very turbulent, but even something like not having access to your Facebook account anymore, that is also linked to so many other things. It can be very, maybe even emotional. So I think it's because most people haven't really experienced a very turbulent event in the past that we sometimes think as the majority that we're over exaggerating. Difficult word.
Yeah. So, but losing access to, for example, your Facebook account, let's take that. That sounds like a luxury problem, or isn't it?
It depends on who you're talking to, I guess. Maybe Facebook not anymore, but I can imagine that, for example, Instagram or TikTok or another account can be very meaningful for other people, for maybe especially young people. We do know that social media, and I'm not talking just about correlation, but also causal relationships, can positively influence your relationships that you have with your friends, can positively influence your social capital or the way that you present yourself. Of course, there are also negative things, but don't underestimate that social media still plays a big part for many people in developing who they are and their social network.
Rob?
Thanks. Yeah, about being dependent on your Facebook account or your Instagram account. I always do ritualistic Facebook account burnings during my lectures, during the breaks, in which I illustrate how dependent we are. As I tell everyone that they are actually very dependent on Facebook, like users of drugs and stuff like that. And then all the students have a laugh and say that I'm exaggerating. And so I invite them every break to burn down their Facebook accounts. I mean, permanently deleting them. And if you put this to the test, there's almost no one who will actually try to do this. You have a few who actually raise their hand and say, yeah, I tried for a few days to go without Instagram or Facebook, but it got too troublesome for my friends to contact me or to do my schoolwork. So I'm always returning. So yeah, it's not that easy actually. And it's a bit like smoking. We don't like to admit how dependent we have become to these services.
Alec, you wanted to weigh on in this?
Yeah, this is not my opinion, but well, I haven't thought about it, but is it fair to say that our dependency is our own fault, so we just shouldn't be dependent, or is it more than that?
Rob?
It's a network effect. That's what I like about it. It's social media, so it's actually also Sartre had a really nice quote: "The hell are the others." It's because the others are on there that we keep on being stuck here. Unless you're an alcoholic, you don't go to pubs where your friends are not at the same time. And that's the problem here as well. As long as all your friends stay with Facebook, you're going to stay there as well. I think the small, not really big privacy outbreak announced by WhatsApp earlier this year caused a lot of people to consider moving to Signal. But if you look now at how many people stick with WhatsApp, illustrates the same point. It's really hard to mobilize an entire social network, mobilizing your 250 friends at the same time, also mobilizing your granny, your parents. It's almost impossible.
Yes, Ralph? You're still muted. There we go.
Sorry. I guess I want to continue on what Rob was saying. When you look, for example, at many students, and I guess, Alec, you're still a student, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
You probably don't really use, or employed that much the services that are offered by your school, but maybe you have a Facebook group where you discuss examination questions, or a WhatsApp group with your fellow students. Well, that's at least something that I noticed from my students, is the moment that they did an oral examination with me is that 5 minutes afterwards, it's posted on Facebook or it's posted in a WhatsApp group where all the students are. So basically, they're using it also for other activities for their school. We in our professional life do the same thing. I now follow Twitter also to see the non-published articles of all of my fellow colleagues. So it's something that I guess more and more that we're dependent on, and we don't really realize it until it's gone. So earlier today, they were working outside. I didn't have access to the internet, and I didn't have electricity for 2 hours. I didn't really know what to do. So basically, we shouldn't underestimate how dependent we are of these things. And you can say, yeah, it's an individual choice, but we're a social being, and we're all children of our society. So it's not completely fair to say that, I guess.
Now, what I thought was interesting is that Rob gave the example of going to your students and trying to burn their Facebook accounts, challenging them to see, well, if it is that easy for you, why don't you do it? But couldn't you say that's maybe pushing that comparison just a little bit too much, in the sense that if we compare it to other media, like, let's say, my TV at home, if I were to tell you, well, why don't you destroy your TV and then just continue from that point on? I'm sure you could do it. It's just unpleasant, but that doesn't mean you're dependent on it. And it's the same. Could it be said that it's the same for Facebook or any of those other social media accounts?
I think it's partly the same, but I would already disagree on. Yeah, television is only the hardware layer, while you add a layer on top, this social layer, and that's the tricky or sticky part you have to consider as well. As long as your network keeps on using it, you'll have to keep on using it as well. That's why I also wanted to compliment the fact that we're now streaming on Twitch, using Discord, two platforms I never have to use as an academic, because we are completely locked in the Microsoft environment, which I deplore a lot.
I think, Ralph, you had something to remark on this as well.
No, I guess it was the same remark as Rob, is that the main difference, I guess, between social media and our smartphone and so on, is that it's not just we that are connected to the device, we're connected to all of our networks that are also included in that device. So there's often a saying that, for example, people say that we're hooked on gadgets, but other people say, no, we're hooked on each other. And those gadgets are a means that connect us to those other people. So we're very much social beings. And don't underestimate also, I guess, the way or the possibilities that we have to present ourselves in that online realm. You can really be an actor on the stage, where every like that you get is an applause for your behavior. So I guess this is kind of different than just, well, throwing away your television set.
All right, Joran?
I thought Ina wanted to say something before me.
Ina?
I did, actually. Thank you,
Okay,
Joran.
sorry.
It's okay. I actually had 2 points to make there, because Rob already mentioned that sometimes for work you have to get an account for certain services that you wouldn't even be interested in yourself. Or in my case, being relatively privacy sensitive, I never had a Google account until I joined my current place of work. And now I actually have to do a lot via Google. This goes for many other online services as well. So, and I guess that is actually true for many people. I mean, sometimes you just have to connect with people. It's not just that you're addicted to being connected with your friends. In some cases, there's just no way out. I'm still, so far, I've managed to stay out of WhatsApp, but I'm not so sure whether I can keep this up for much longer, because more and more even authorities are moving to WhatsApp as their primary channel of communication. So that will really become an issue. Another thing, I guess, that we need to keep in mind is that companies like Facebook and Google, they're marketing companies. And if we are aware of those conditions, of the fact that this is a marketing company and not a communication services or an entertainment platform, as long as you are aware of that, then of course the issue of control comes back. But then you will have already a different way of interacting with these platforms.
Joran?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I think especially in these times with the Rona, that social media is really important to keep connected with your friends, because if you're not gonna do it via social media and you can't do it in real life, are there any other options? How are you? Well, yeah, okay, texting via phone, sure, that's a thing. But other than that, like, you can't really do a video call over the phone, or at least I think so. So if there are any other ways, would we use them instead? I'm not sure.
Rob?
Yeah, I wanted to begin on what Ines said, because I think it's a great remark also to kind of say, okay, social media can be quite bad and there are some nasty practices there, but as she said, they are marketing companies. If you know that they are in business of keeping you glued to your screen as long as possible, you can take some countermeasures. If you know that they like to spread sensational news, you can take, again, countermeasures and go and look at Twitter or your local newspaper to see other parts of the news. And I think that's really important, checking out where the KPIs of the company are perhaps driving revenue so hard that they are no longer in your own best interest. And simply knowing that is already a really powerful cure, I think.
Alec?
Maybe this is just me, but I personally am not sure where I can find information of which I'm 100% sure. And also, I think as much as Facebook gets money from advertisements and spreads news that's could possibly just be a sensation to keep you watching on Facebook, I think newspapers also earn money from advertisements. Maybe I'm wrong in this, so maybe they have the same pitfall. I don't know if this is correct, but this is just what I think right now.
So what you're trying to say is that, yes, they each have their own agenda and all of that, but other types of media throughout our history and current day also have their own agenda. So
yeah, I think they have the same vice, sort of.
Yeah. So what is the issue there? Is it then so much more harmful to have that in social media as well? Ina?
Actually, I think Alec is making a very good point, and it was already true, of course, before, but now under the influence of big social media companies, also smaller or more independent media companies are moving in the same direction and also using data in a way that is manipulative, trying to keep your attention for as long as possible. Using data in a way that is quite questionable and that you might not agree with. So in that sense, social media platforms may also have like a detrimental effect on other media platforms.
What is this for saying these detrimental ways of using our information that I'm hearing coming up? What is that? What do I need to, as someone who doesn't know anything about it, as maybe some of our viewers, what do I need to understand under that term? What is detrimental?
Well, there's a whole host of things. Not all of them are proven. I just heard of a really nice study. Let me check. Yeah, I still have it. The search engine manipulation effects. Checking how changing the ranking of the results of search engines influences your perception of who you're going to vote on. That's an example. So there's this PNAS study already saying that there is a small effect and it cannot be ignored. So that's quite detrimental, I think. So the main concept is that a commercial company is in a way filtering the public sphere, if you want to, and also parts of your private sphere. in such a way that we are losing control, and sometimes that's leading to polarization, and this polarization can be quite bad for societies. I think Belgium is one of the best examples there. We have two really big filter bubbles. You have the French-speaking filter bubble on one side, and you have a Dutch-speaking one on the other side. And that partly explains why we had to do so long without a government during the last elections, because you could promise whatever you wanted on one side of the country and the other would never have heard of it. So polarization is definitely one of those detrimental effects.
Ina?
Yeah, since we're talking in the atmosphere of games anyway, there are two ways in which this plays out in games, and I wouldn't necessarily call them detrimental, but they are in a way worrisome. One is that games try to capture your attention for as long as possible, of course, right? And you may want to spend your time perhaps in other ways, but sometimes you just go on all night. So that's one thing. Like it's also part of the attention economy. And another is that it has been found in some studies recently that games are, well, I mean, this is not actually news. Games are trying to steer you towards, well, some games at least are trying to steer you towards buying more things in game. And here they use really like whatever they know, all the data they have about your behavioral patterns to get you, and whatever they know about human biases anyway, to get you to manipulate you to buy more in game. And I'm not sure, I've never heard of anyone going broke over it, but still this is rather manipulative and could be worrisome.
Yeah. Ralph?
I think if you would make the discussion more abstract, you could really doubt about the positive things about always being treated as a customer, and everything that you do in your leisure time and so on, it can be used to steer you into a certain direction. It's not just games. It's for example, also in advertising. Think about advert games, for example, where commercials are also hidden within advertisement, within content that children are playing. So basically, it can influence them to, well, actually make them buy more, or basically ask their parents to buy more stuff for them. So basically, I guess this is very problematic. The polarization is problematic. The fact that every bit of information is being used, that extensive commodification, you could say, but the fact that we're always treated as a customer and not really as a citizen, that is worrisome for our democracy.
Maybe slightly off tangent, but I heard you pick up the subject of, children and games, and that's where they start coming into contact with this subject. Now, it is the case that in games and social media, those two have started to merge more and more over the passing years. And for a lot of young children, that is the first contact that they also have with the social media institution, I will call it. Are there only negatives in your opinion, or is that maybe a safe way to introduce them to social media? It's maybe one that merits a little bit more digestion time. Yeah, Joram?
I think it depends on the community of the game itself, because you have really wholesome communities of some games that try to help each other out, and well, it's a wholesome experience. You get to know new people, you get to know new things about the game that you love. But you also have really toxic communities. I'm just thinking of when I was playing Call of Duty back in the day, like the shit talking that went on there was incredible. So I became a shit talker myself. I think it's better now, but at least I hope so. So yeah, I think it really depends on the community if it's a good interaction or not. Because, well, if I'm gonna take, for example, Stardew Valley, good game, gotta buy it. Not sponsored. For example, Stardew Valley, if you go on Reddit and you're like, hey, what's happening here? What's happening there? There's tons of people that want to help you with the game because they love the game. They know you love the game and want to know more about it. And like those experiences, at least for me, are more memorable than all the shit talking in other games.
Alec, you also wanted to jump in?
Yeah, because you were talking about good and possible positive effects, right? Of this social media. Well, I don't want to discredit the industry that I want to work in, but I don't think games, well, they can offer negative social experiences, but I don't think the positive social experience they offer are better or more or a wider range than normal social interactions, because you can be offended a lot easier online, but all the positive effects seem to have a sort of debuff. Personally, I don't think online friendship is as connecting or as satisfying as real life friendship, to me at least, while online offensiveness is much more, it's easier online, so I think all the negative effects are much easier there, and all the positive effects are dampened because it's just online.
All right. Ralph?
I just wanted to say something about the age of the children, of course. We've done some research in the past with children aged 9 to 12, and we also looked at their moral advertising literacy. So basically, to what extent that they knew about advertisements, different types of advertisements, personalization, advertisements that are hidden in games or in product placement and so on. And we also looked at how they morally evaluated those different strategies. And we have to say that often the knowledge about those hidden ways of steering them into a certain direction is that it's limited, of course, and it also influences the way that they can evaluate it. So I guess I'm not a gamer and I don't do gaming research. I guess it can also have very positive experiences, but when also being confronted with social media and the way that they use information, it will not always be clear that they'll also be treated as a customer and that their information is also being used to influence them. And that's not really ethical, you could say, is that if you don't know if your information is being gathered and used to steer you into a certain direction, can also be harmful for children, of course.
Do you think it would already solve a lot of the issues if the games, when you first boot them up or right before you buy them on the cover, anywhere during that process that they put on the top, you will be treated as a consumer and we will try to sell you things? Or is that more self-implied when you go on to this online type of game?
I would just let children be children and don't really confront them with this complex environment that even a lot of adults do not really get.
Yeah. All right. Rob?
Let me unmute myself. I wanted to react on what Joran said with the communities, and also what I saw in the chat on Twitch, where one of the questions was, how can we reinvent social media? And I think Joran gave a really good example of reinventing this ourselves. It's setting good examples and having enough people in a community setting the right example or setting the rules on how you should or could interact. And I think in Reddit, it's really interesting to see indeed how different subreddits indeed have different norms of how you can interact with other people. You have really respectful communities and you have these more aggressive communities, I think. And that's one of the ways where you could say, even though the companies are complete shit in terms of KPIs or how they try to make you dependent on their media, it's actually you setting the rules as a user together with the rest of the community. So that's also an interesting aspect there, that we can do this ourselves.
Wouldn't the deck already be stacked against us? Because what I'm hearing right now, these companies are pushing their own agenda, even if we are all really nice people. Wouldn't that be really hard to change everything?
No, I don't think so. And you see that there's this natural limit for us. If you look at influencer here, who here has real love for influencers? Like nobody. Why? Because there's this intermixing between a commercial message and being an authentic social being. So I think there's something really great bottom up. If you look at it bottom upwards, as human beings, we really appreciate authenticity. And so I think there is a natural limit to how commercial you can go with a platform. Influencers try to commercialize themselves for a part, and I think they have the right to do that. But we have a choice to follow them or not, and there's no algorithm strong enough, I think, to keep on pushing influencers your way if you don't want to see them. Reddit is a great example again, because the only thing they can do is interweave commercial messages between the different things users are saying, and I guess it's the same for Twitter. So there are limits, and I don't think it's possible for social media companies right now to surpass those limits, because we value authenticity too much, and that's great.
Isn't it in that case easy to say, okay, then we can just ignore the issue because it's not going to be strong enough to affect us? Even though what I've heard earlier, and I know I'm playing devil's advocate here, but even though I've heard earlier that they are strong enough to influence our decisions.
Yeah, it seems we're giving academic answers. We're saying yes and no at the same time. No, I think we have to make a difference between your interpersonal interactions and then going towards systemic effects. There is polarization, and polarization is not done by one person. It's a whole group, and it's not only that group, it's actually how media interact with social media platforms and start creating bigger messages. And then you probably even have political manipulation by some larger countries as well. So who's to blame then? It's not only the social media company, it's also the media, it's weaker democracies, more dominant countries trying to influence these less dominant countries. So yeah, we need to make a distinction on what level we're talking about, I think.
All right. Can I then summarize that on a personal level, we're a bit more armed against it, but on an institutional level, it's more difficult in the grand scheme of things? Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that for a large part. I think we just need to create institutions that create more individuals that are better armed against these malpractices or bad effects of social media.
Yeah. Alec, you wanted to jump in on this?
Yes, on what you said, I think I might be taking two big steps here, but I think the problem is with the social media where people are manipulated, is it's because they're treated like a herd, but on the same level with games and social media, people are also milked for their attention. And I think the source of all this problem is seeing people as just a herd that you move around. And I think what you said, where the constitutions have problem with changing this, because then they also see people as herd. So just trying to make other rules for the social media companies, for example, then you just try to alter the herd instead of weaponizing or arming each individual cow or sheep or whatever animal it is in this analogy. I think that would be a much better solution where, for example, kids in middle school are taught to be more skeptical or something, or critical thinking. I think that's a much more effective and durable, sustainable method of protecting people against this than just giving rules to social media and they'll just try to work around it anyway. So just to see them more as individuals rather than a herd that you just try to alter a little bit.
All right. Yes. It was at the exact same time. I'm going to let Ina go first. Yes.
I will yield to Ralph then, because I was actually going to refer to what he said in his presentation. So.
Aha, Ralph.
Okay, so basically what I wanted to say is that it's typical that we are always referring to that structure and the agency, that's that typical tension. But and this is also something that I said, and maybe this is also something that Ina said, wanted to hint upon, is that we shouldn't treat media literacy or privacy literacy as that silver bullet solution. Because if we would just focus on making people more cognizant, even critical, that would not solve structural issues. We also need protection. We also need social media platforms to follow the rules. So we can expect much of individual users, but that's not going to be enough. So silver media, so media literacy is never going to be a silver bullet solution. I guess that's my main idea.
Ina?
Indeed, yeah. I also don't. So responsibilizing the individual is an interesting idea, of course. And of course, we should arm people against any abuse if we can. But as Ralph already pointed out, children, especially people who are just getting into this sphere, they do not have the tools yet to really withstand whatever is coming at them. This is, as Alec already mentioned before as well, this is intentional attempts to manipulate us. And so whether they are successful in this intention or not, the intention itself should not just be allowed to be carried out without any restraints. So yeah, I do believe the first responsibility for not abusing you is with the potential abuser, right? It's not you having to learn to defend yourself. It's people should not take advantage of you.
Yeah, when we're talking about that then, because of course I have a couple of questions going through my head when we're talking about children and how they should learn to deal with this, because that sounds negative in and of itself, learning to deal with that, whereas in an ideal situation they wouldn't have to. Yeah, that raises other questions, I assume, like from what age do you consider them good enough to start learning? From what age is it safe to learn? Is it ever safe to learn? Because adults as well can become quite victimized by this. So there's not really a good solution to that problem unless we start looking towards the people doing for lack of a better word, I'll call it the manipulation or the abuse in this case. My question is then, are there any social legal systems that are in place to sort of combat this a little bit, to take the fight to these big companies? I see Rob vehemently shaking, no, man, we're powerless against these big institutions.
No. I was nodding my head. I think for something else. I wanted to make to say we're trying to fix social media, but somewhere we have to make the distinction. Can we fix the world by fixing social media? There are some things wrong in the world, and that means that bad things will happen. I mean, that's the world we live in. There are just bad people everywhere, and just negative effects as well. So I guess we have to cope with those all of the time anyway. Are there legal actions we can take? Yeah, and I think we are evolving in a direction. We have to be careful, of course. We have, I forgot the name, the famous Austrian guy, Max Schrems, doing all kinds of class actions, and class actions are becoming more easily to perform in terms for the GDPR. So we are getting more and more tools, I think, to do some of these things. The only sad thing I feel there is that it seems that you have to be a lawyer if you want to start taking the fight to these big companies. And there I was nodding my head again. Not everyone is a lawyer when they're 12 years old or interested to start reading the GDPR and privacy statements to set things right. So yeah, we still have something to do there. And I guess Ralph's point on the silver bullet of media literacy comes in handy there, because I would never expect my children or anyone to start studying law, because they need to be able to fight the power in social media.
Does that mean that we have no responsibility as a consumer when it comes to this? Or am I being too evil by saying that?
Yeah, you're really evil, but I'll let the others answer.
Okay. Alec.
I think it's always best to, but it's, I think, to be to take care of yourself rather than to count on the mercy of other people. Definitely, if it's like big companies. So I think you should always try to secure yourself first before you count on other people to act in your interest.
Which brings the war back to an individual level, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
For me, at least. Yeah.
All right, Joran.
I think it's easier to fight on it on an individual level before taking it to the institutional level, because if we should want to fight it on an institutional level, we have to know exactly what's gonna fix things, because if we just say, yeah, you can't do this, there's gonna be a loophole. There's always a loophole. So is the loophole they're gonna find worse than what we have right now, or is it gonna be a step forwards? And I think before fighting it, we have to think about how our fighting can make things worse.
So you feel like what we have right now might only be the tip of the iceberg, and maybe we don't want to see how deep this rabbit hole goes.
I think we should have to fight it, but we can't just go into it nilly-willy, head straight. Like, I think that might cause a lot of issues.
All right. Okay. Now, I'm slowly going to move on to the questions we have from the Twitch chat, because I've quite a few. I think one of them is that I do want to tackle is still a question from someone that handed in a question before the stream. Let's say we've posted something and then we regret it after. What can we do about this? Is that it? Is that already that fight has been lost, or is there something we can do? Anyone? Yes, Joran.
Well, that is the question that I posted, so I just want to say, I don't know.
All right, Ralph?
So basically, you're always allowed to ask the service provider to delete any type of information that they have about you. So they have to do this, but of course, it's always difficult to know if they really have done this. It's also really difficult to know how your own behavior has steered the algorithm, for example. Is it then also going to be deleted from that, and so on? So it's very difficult to totally delete yourself from the system and how it has worked in the past and how it will work in the future. But I do think that you're referring, for example, to more the social side, maybe, that you can always delete certain tweets or Facebook messages and so on, even though it takes a lot of time, but you can do this. Of course, and this is something that I see now happening quite a lot. If, for example, a more famous person tweets something, deletes it, automatically people will have screenshots of it if it's less or more provocative. So it's very difficult to, even on the social side, and if you have a big audience, for example, to fully delete your online self.
All right. Joran, you wanted to go in on this?
Yeah, I was just about to say, for someone that's a little more known by a community, there will be screenshots, there will be saved videos. So for example, if you're a YouTuber or something, it's been in the past few years, it's been happening a lot that there have been tweets from 7 to 8 years ago, like, hey, he made a joke that in the context of 2012, 2009, whatever, it was okay to make those jokes because the internet was kind of new, anonymity and stuff, but it's not accepted now. Like, it's from 2000 and it's from 2008. What can you do about it? Like, you can apologize, sure, but then people in 2016 have apologized for stuff in 2008, and then 2 years later, it's a big scandal because the same thing from 2016 is rediscovered in 2018. So what do? Do you apologize again? Do you just ignore it? Is that worse? Well, like, I mean, yeah, a lot of questions.
Ralph?
I know that at the end of my PhD, I wrote it down as you have to have a heightened dramaturgical awareness. So basically, you have to know your present and your future audience, and which is of course very difficult to do, and possible to do. But what I'm really trying to say is that I guess we're still having signs of an immature network society in which, well, basically, for example, if a teenager does something has done something in the past, and for example, if you're searching a new job and an employee cannot really look past that, then well, basically, that's not really your own fault. What else can you do then? Apologize or put it into context or whatever. So I guess you shouldn't be too harsh on yourself as well, because that will also stop you from ever doing something online publicly. And we know that this can also have good effects, it can have a positive effect on your social capital, on your presentation of self, and so on. So yeah, of course, you have to be reflective about that context collapse, about your invisible audience, and so on. But if you try to focus too much on it, you will not do anything more online. And yeah, there's that.
Ina, you also wanted to go in on this?
Actually, I think Alec was there before me.
Because you raised your hand at the same time as Ralph. But I'll move on to Alec. Alec?
Okay, yeah, I really agree with Ralph, and I also think that because I personally have a lot of experience with this problem, or well, some experience, and I don't think you can predict what will be wrong in the future, which is like the things you post now, or maybe you could, but it's not worth stressing about all the time. And for me personally, what helped the most is being able to verbally defend yourself. And I also think what would help with this problem is that people, but maybe that's because earlier I said that you should be able to defend yourself and not count on the mercy of others, but I might contradict that now. But I think other people should not be as well, they should be able to see things in perspective. Because if it wasn't wrong yet, or if it wasn't embarrassing yet, or whatever, then I don't think the judgment counts as much. So I think that's the mentality that should be, or we should try to alter at least. And if that doesn't work, just be able to defend yourself. And if it really wasn't wrong then you should be. And if they don't listen to that, they're not reasonable, so they're not worth depending on, I guess.
So embrace more of a growth mentality than of a blame mentality is what you're saying would be a good step forward.
Yes, and also if I don't know if I can use this example, but a long time ago, Justin Trudeau he painted his face black, and a little later there's a lot of backfire. And well, I don't know when the face painting was, but apparently there was such a problem then. And for him, this is really different because his job really counts on people liking him. So in that way, it sucks. But I don't think you should be as dependent on the opinion of others in the first place. And maybe you can't move around it because other people can put pressure on your employer to fire you or something like that, and they can bully you. That's of course really bad. But I think the dependency on public opinion is a big part of the thorn in this, and that should be avoided on an individual level as much as this is possible. So that's my opinion.
Ina?
Yeah, that sounds like sound advice, right? I do think I almost feel like this will eventually happen to all of us. I mean, there've also been social media posts where people filmed somebody else who was doing something offline that may have been slightly off color, and then was then put online by somebody else, and then of course also created a big shitstorm about this person. So yeah, this may happen to all of us. We all say things at some point that we shouldn't perhaps say out loud, but yeah, I mean, really. I was thinking as a remediation, perhaps take a page from the book of the teenager that Ralph presented as well, who joked about her own silliness, who made jokes or who put into context and basically said, look at what an idiot I am. That might be one way to deal with making a stupid mistake that's in the that everybody can see. Joke about yourself. Say, yeah, that was really stupid. So that may be one way to solve it. Another way that has been proposed actually is obfuscation. So you bury your idiocy in the middle of a lot of other idiocy. And so it kind of gets lost in the whole storm of nonsense that you're posting. And that is one way to perhaps make it go away or make it less bad than the other things that you could do.
Joran?
So if you make one bad joke, you just make 10 others, so it doesn't, it's not seen right away.
So you should try it.
Yeah. Alec?
I have.
I guess this personally works for me. I don't think that any future employer or whatever, if they will look at my social media, I doubt they'll think I'm serious with any of these things. It's just like because you put it in perspective yourself. So I think that's a really powerful weapon or like defense.
See, here I hear a lot about taking the control back to yourself, and it sort of ties in loosely with a question posed by one of the viewers that they ask if there's been a normalization of like hacking culture or being leaked online. Is it sort of something that we start doing to ourselves to prove our legitimacy, maybe as an online figure or as a proof of I have made it in the online world? Yes, Alec?
I have a question. About your question. Do you mean that being judged is the trophy, or not being judged is a trophy, or judging? I don't get.
I think being judged here is the trophy, because a lot of big names have had leaks or scandals or something like that, and that of course there's the old adage, bad publicity is still publicity. So is it maybe becoming a sign of you've made it if you've been leaked or hacked or plastered all over the internet? Joran?
I think there are people that like any attention they get. So if it's bad attention, it's as good attention. But I don't think everyone is like that. I hope not everyone is like that. So, yeah, what did I want to say about it? I think for some people, they try to get leaked. They try to get their privacy broken into, but it's still not something right to do from our perspective. So like if they like it, sure, whatever, you do you, but it's still not good from the people that actually leaked it or actually tried to break someone's privacy. If they like it or not, unless it's staged, I guess, but like, yeah, that's a whole other topic, I guess. So yeah, I don't think it's a good thing, but I think the people that try to get leaked and all that stuff might desensitize, is that a word? Yes, people for actual leakage to see how bad it actually can get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alec?
I think about what you said, whether people are proud of this. I do think so. I remember being proud of it myself in the third year of high school when I was suspended from Facebook. And my little brother, yesterday, he was suspended from school for one day because he rated the Instagram live stream of his high school. And he's also, he got a lot of credibility with it, with his high school friends. So I think in a way, this is sort of, well, mostly young people like taking them to the big guys. So I think this is sort of, it's something that's applauded as much, or also applauded as much as is, or just like it is attacked and looked down upon, it's also applauded and a trophy or something.
Joran?
I think I might be part of the problem because I really think it's funny.
Those are all different viewpoints on the matter. Of course, it depends on the seriousness of what is going on, right?
I think the rating that isn't funny. It's just how the school reacted with instantly a suspension of a day. Like, I think they could have handled that differently, and I don't know. It made me laugh. That's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Ralph?
Yeah, kind of reminds me, maybe it's not totally what the question is all about, but it reminds me about the Ashley Madison hack a couple of years ago. That was a website that encouraged people to, have an affair. So life is short, have an affair. That was their motto. And basically the website was also hacked, and a lot of personal information what you could find on the web. So basically, they noticed how so many people were looking up who cheated, who had an account on that website, and so on. And actually, some communication scientists did some studies where they analyzed the discourse on Twitter on how they communicated about this. And you could also definitely see that only a minority found that they deserved to have privacy, that privacy was also right for those people. The majority was more like they did something bad, so we can just give up their privacy and throw out all their personal details. So most people thought about that when tweeting about this event. So I think this kind of shows how much we still have to grow as a society in caring about the privacy of other people. Even people who do bad things, they deserve privacy.
Right. Because if I look at it from a different point of view, you wouldn't say that it's a little bit our responsibility and maybe an inherent risk of subscribing to, and I'm not necessarily saying that cheating website, but to any of those things, that it's a little bit on our end as well, that we carry a part of that responsibility, sort of like if I were to step into a car, there is the risk of an accident.
I guess it's kind of different. It's like the same as saying you bought a house, so yeah, you can be robbed. So you should be. It's different. I do think if you have a policy of your network and your data should, they say that they will manage your data properly, is that you should trust them, and that when people do bad things that they should be punished. Just the same thing as if you buy a house and other people come and take things in your house, then you're not the one to blame. Yep. So we should be careful with responsibilizing people with and victimization, I guess is a better word here. You cannot just blame the victim.
All right. Joran?
Yeah, I have a question for Ralph, or well, for anyone. So, say there's like a known person, for example, a politician, and there is information about this person on the internet for free, she or he, or whatever, put that information of themselves out there. If they do a bad thing and you share that information around that he or she has put out there, is it breaking their privacy? Or I think I'm wording it badly. Do you know what I mean?
If I maybe rephrase it just a little bit, and I'll blow it up just a little bit. If you put pictures of yourself online somewhere and somebody else shares those, is that a breach of your privacy or not? Rob?
I don't think that was entirely what Joran meant. Yeah. I would rather go for Bart de Wever has some nude pics on a forum of himself, and now he's tied into a corruption scandal. Can we share the pictures of Bart de Wever because he's tied into a corruption scandal? I hope everyone can say no to that. And also, I think if you look at El Kawakibi's trial by media, for example, you can say the same thing. I mean, that's an absolute shit show for a democracy that we are all allowed to voice our opinions and have opinions about what is happening there, but we haven't really looked at the facts, or there hasn't been any proper trial. There's a lot of things we can already assume, but that's where I wanted to respond to. I think these people have a right to privacy, but even if you don't believe in it, you could just call it, they have a right to be trialed just and fair. That's one of the fundamentals of our democratic society. And there I think we should at least see that these are two different contexts, and we should try to keep them separate, how hard it may be for us. So you can gossip about people, but when you do it, you know that you should not treat this gossip as a fact when you want to hire someone, for example. I think that ties into Alex's example as well. If you have a shitty social media profile and people can find it online about you and you're looking for a job, it should not be taken into account. So we need to put those, try to ignore those separate contexts, I think.
Ina?
I think I want to add that there are indeed limits to the right to privacy, as some of the discussions in the chat also showed or seem to bring forward. Privacy can be used indeed to as a shield to hide behind, to do things that really are not okay. I mean, especially from feminist theory, there have been a lot of studies that have shown that privacy has been used to for example, hide domestic abuse. You know, my home is my castle, nobody comes beyond the front door. But actually, beyond the front door also things can happen that are not okay. And even if they happen in the privacy of the home, this is a moment where we need to balance different rights, of course. I mean, people have a right to liberty and safety and you know. And so, yes, there are definitely limits to privacy, and there are also limits to anonymity. To what extent is anonymity really still, you know, the right way to go, and in which cases do we need to think about, okay, should anonymity here be limited to some extent?
Yeah, privacy and anonymity aren't the shield to everything. There are limits to that. Joran?
Yeah, the thing I was referring to, I think it happened like a month ago. There was this English politician, and she got hired by Reddit. But there have been a whole lot of controversial things with this specific politician. Well, bad things, but I'm not going to go into it. And the whole Reddit hive mind came together, shared her name, which was public, but like not everyone knew about it, but like her full name. And a lot of subreddits went private in protest of her being hired by Reddit. And I think it was like 2 days, maybe max, before she got fired, because so many subreddits were fighting against Reddit because, well, this person got hired that did bad things or was connected with bad things.
Is that a problem with privacy then, though, what we're talking about? Because what I'm hearing is that this person had a public function before
yeah,
and that's what was being attacked instead of her personal life?
Well, the controversial thing was in her private life. It had something to do with her family members. But because of what happened in her private life, because she enabled some things, or so they say, I'm not completely sure about the whole story, but they started sharing around things about her that were already public, but people that wouldn't have known about her wouldn't have known the things that were shared. So is that a breach of privacy, or is that something else? And if it's something else, well, what could we call it?
Is it maybe a good idea in that case to sort of trace it back just one step further? Because what I'm hearing from you, I don't know the situation in question, but you're saying personal details from her family had nothing to do with her office or whatever she was doing, were leaked or published somewhere else, and then brought in a different place and were used there again as weaponry. I'd say if we follow that chain of information, the problem existed in the first place, in the first location.
Well, that's also the thing, because I don't know the full context. I can't say when this information about her private life got public. So, like, is it then? I don't think it's my fault, but can it be seen as my fault to, for example, talk about it right now? For example, but I really don't want to talk about her name. I don't even remember the name, but like, what's happening here? Like, if you take something private from someone, and then if it goes through so many people that some people don't even know the source anymore, is it that person's fault for knowing things about another person's private? It's a really difficult question. Sorry.
Is there someone that wants to jump in on it? I saw Alec, you raised your hand just a little bit ago. Is it about this topic or about the previous?
No, so I'll just delay it.
Okay, all right. Ralph, I think accidentally Rob might have clicked something. There we go. Here we go. Ralph.
I don't know anything about the specifics, so it's probably a bit difficult to have a clear judgment. But of course, if you share information of a person in another context or in a public context, of course, it can be regarded as a privacy breach for that specific person. Even things that we have potentially posted publicly once, and if that's used for other purposes in another context for another audiences, then it can be seen as a privacy breach, of course. So it's not just about controlling information. I guess it's also about controlling the social situation in which the information circulates. But it seems to me, I don't know the specifics, that now private information of her life is being used and maybe even misused to confront her. And of course, if that was things that remain in the private life, unless she did something illegal or whatever, I don't know, then it should remain in the private sphere if she didn't really allow it to be in the public sphere. Of course, you have to weigh in privacy with other fundamental rights. If she did something, I don't know, like child abuse, I don't know. Of course, these things have to weigh in on one another. But if my answer would be, if you're using information that was already public or private in another context, it can be experienced as a privacy breach, of course.
Yeah. Is it then that in this case the company chose to then fire that person to not continue their working relationship? Is that? Do you feel like that's a good reaction of that company? They were not the ones to get that information somewhere. They were not the ones to spread it, but they did act on that. Or do you feel like that's something that should have been ignored if it wasn't something illegal, of course, right? It's hard, yeah.
It's very difficult to say this, of course, even if it's not illegal per se, it can be very non-ethical. So it's very difficult. Depends on the function that she carries out and so on. So it's very difficult to answer, for me at least.
All right. Alec?
Sort of about this if I understand the situation that Jordan explained correctly, this is all the problems at once, because it's being doxed, like the personal information being leaked to other people. It's and I think the people of Reddit did this because they feared that someone with a political career might influence their platform. So it's the fear of manipulation, it's doxing, and it's also putting pressure on her from her employer to fire her. So it's all three bad things at once. And I don't think which of these bad things should disappear, because if they haven't doxed her or put pressure on her to make her leave the company, then maybe she would have used her political influence to change the platform, and it's it's a crossfire. I don't know which is more wrong or which should disappear. And I also think that the fear here that she would manipulate the people comes from a lack of trust. But I wonder if the academics here, what they think about that the Belgian government cracked old cell phones to cover up, I think, drug dealers in Antwerp. Do you think this is wrong? Because I really don't like cocaine dealers. I hope that is clear. But do you think that all forms of cracking information from the police force or the Secret Service or whatever, is that good? And I guess it counts on trust. I don't know if I'm being paranoid, but do you think that all these forms of cracking information is correct or ethical?
I can answer your question if you don't use all forms, but some forms and some cell phones, you have to look at it case by case. And I would trust a police state that has enough safety measures and checks to check whether these things are balanced. And so you say all phones, and that's where I'm saying, well, I don't know anymore if you're going to call it all phones, then I have a problem with it. But if it's some phones and there's a reasonable suspicion, or it's for a set period of time only during this operation, and well, you see all kinds of checks and balances, then I would say yes. I would be far more worried about all the automated image recognition cameras we're deploying in Belgium, for example, because there we keep on adding more, and you have this sunk cost fallacy where, since we installed them for one purpose, it should make sense to use them for something else, which has been called function creep. And that's something I'm far more worried about than this one-time action, because it costs money to track these phones and to crack them, I think. And afterwards, they will stop because it costs money. And with these cameras, it's the other way around. It would actually cost them money to remove them again, almost. And that's more worrisome. So I would say there, let's all be very critical when governments start investing in hard to turn back surveillance measures.
All right. Jordan, I see that you still have something to say on the matter. Unfortunately, I've been getting the signal that we have gone a little bit over time. There are still a lot of questions on Twitch that we haven't been able to answer. So there is quite a lot of buzz about this topic, and people that are curious about diverse situations. I would like to thank all of you for clarifying just a little bit about the complexity of this topic, about how individual awareness, collective awareness about this issue could already help us move on to a next step to deal with this topic and this issue. Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your wisdom, and to everybody at home, thank you for posting your questions, for being actively involved in this discussion, and we hope to see you for the next Game for Thought stream. Thank you so much, and goodbye, good evening. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining tonight's stream. I really hope you all out there enjoyed it. I know I did, definitely. I love being in the Twitch chat. Thank you, thank you, thank you. A big thank you to all of our colleagues here behind the scenes that really put all of this together. Thank you to Alexander, our sound guy, as always, making sure that people can hear us. Thank you to Sandra and Carlos, Catalina, Bert, Luna, and Sandra and Carlos actually are our tech experts today, so thank you so much for helping us out. And Bros also from Quindo, just a plug for the Game for Thought podcast series really quickly. So we actually have a podcast up and running for Game for Thought on Spotify. So if you go on Spotify and you just type in Game for Thought, you'll definitely be able to find it. So thank you to Bros from Quindo Media Lab so much for putting that all together as well. And one last thank you to our Master Chief. Thank you to Rick for making all of this possible and for making this live stream studio possible. Our next stream, very important information. This is actually not our last stream of the academic year, which is very exciting. So we'll have another stream coming up on the 20th of May. So already go ahead and mark your calendars. And the topic for that one will be crunch time and well-being in the industry. So make sure you go ahead and watch that one as well. I'm sure it will be a very interesting discussion. Thank you so much once again, and be sure to check out that podcast. We had a lot of questions for this stream, especially, and wonderful discussion. I think a lot of content is still to come. So make sure you go ahead, go to Spotify and check out the podcast as well for further discussion. Thank you, of course, the biggest thank you of the night to everyone involved in the panel. Thank you to Ralph for your wonderful presentation. Thank you to Rob, Ina, Robin, our returning moderator, and of course, our students, Alec and Yoran. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Yet another Game for Thought stream in the books. See you next time.